Okay. So going back to what Nandita wonderfully set out in the etymology of regnum, to reign, it always also has to do with size then, right? The monarch, the sovereign, rules and expansion and conquest becomes a part of that. And so we have the Ghoul here, who is a giant, a mythical giant, but we will see that this mythical giant actually has an existence of its own in various cultures. We see him here on the left in the Book of Kings, the Shahnameh, Persian tales of the 10th, 11th century. The Netflix series Ghoul produced in India, and then various other ghouls roaming around and floating around. So the first set of images speaks to this spatial aspect of our theme. And this is the ghoul in Arabic or ghoul in English, from which the term ghoulish is derived. So you have a whole genre of horror movies that can be associated with that. The ghoul is a humanoid giant who was born in the Arabic fables compiled in the legendary 1001 Arabian Nights, but whose gigantic presence expands to many other cultural territories in a truly trans-spatial format, much in the same way as our term reign implies. Like Goliath and empires, the ghoul too is all about size and expansion. Indeed, the word ghoul is also closely related to an Arabic adjective, which means to size up. In the first session of our series, Nora Khan quite brilliantly introduced the jinn as a mythical creature. The ghoul is related to the jinn, more, bigger, more gigantic. So going back to the issue of space, but certainly related. He could also appear as a temptress, or at least an enchantress, as ghouls have been identified as female creatures who are sometimes called mother ghoul or ghula in Arabic, or relational terms such as aunt ghoul. She is portrayed in many tales luring hapless characters, who are usually men, there's no surprise here, into their home where the ghoul devours them. So we'll get to the vulnerabilities of the ghoul in the latter part. I don't want to only portray her or him or it in a kind of negative light. I think there is a lot of compassion one could have for the ghoul as well, but we will get to that. The ghoul as the ultimate other, so to say, of the mythical world, and hence also a harbinger of resistance and traumas that he or she or it needs to filter out. And perhaps it is these facets and the adaptability that explain why and how the spirit of the ghoul has departed from his original habitat in the Arabic Persian world and conquered various realms of society throughout the globe. So we can already see the Netflix series that I indicated, Ghoul, but indeed, the ghoul appears in many other parts of the world. So another set of images, if I may. So you find the ghoul in the Japanese manga and anime genre. Manga is Japanese for comics, and here in particular in the famous Tokyo Ghoul anime series. So here you have a female ghoul on the one side, a non-gendered ghoul, in Tokyo Ghoul, and it's really a famous anime series in Japan. The ghoul appears in various forms, even going back to, again, our spatial definition and the issue of expansion. You have here an expansion of questions of gender as well. It appears not only as that macho ghoul, if you like, but also as female and non-gendered. So again, space is not only a factor in oppression or hierarchy, it can also be emancipatory in this case. So you find the ghoul also in the US TV series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when Buffy battled with 4 female ghoul enchantresses, a really famous 1990s TV series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Some of you may remember. And one of the episodes was actually called Ghoul Trouble. In this case, you see in the center a rather menacing and evil-looking ghoul. In a more shocking example from a real tragedy, the so-called Plainfield Ghoul in 1950s Minnesota refers to Ed Gein, a mentally ill murderer and body snatcher who built furniture pieces out of the remains of corpses, which he snatched from local graveyards. So this is unfortunately a real story. You see here Ed Gein on the left-hand side, and in the center, I think this is probably the dwelling where he created those sinister furniture pieces out of real human bones. And then, as you would expect, you also have a movie about him. And some of the household names of evil characters like Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of Lambs was also modeled on this chap. Ed Gein himself really was also, I mean, villain, of course, criminal, but in many ways also a victim of his childhood. His father was a horrible alcoholic, and he had serious mental health issues. And so again, I don't want to, further a depiction of the ghoul even in his real manifestation as, uniformly evil. And finally, the ghoul even appears in Harry Potter as a rather benevolent, almost cute creature, which lives in the attic of 12 Grimmauld Place, which was the ancestral home of the Black family, located in the borough of Islington in London. A ghoul task force exists at the Ministry of Magic under the Department of the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. So you have a rather cute looking ghoul here, but size still appears to be an issue. So, the gigantic size of the ghoul certainly is one of the main features. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised that the ghoul has such a vivid presence in global culture. As the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung said, we are living our myths and dreams, sometimes without even knowing it, and we live it as a common human experience. So this is how the ghoul could escape the tales of the Arabian 1001 Nights and travel as far as to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The ghoul as myth, as reality, is an expression of the collective conscious. So this global travel itinerary expresses core ideas that are part of the human species as a whole. This common origin in the collective unconscious explains why a mythical creature, such as the ghoul, who was born in societies at the opposite end of the earth, can be strikingly similar to our own humanoid monsters. I stop there. Thank you.